You are too loose for yoga, and no, that is not a clickbait title, nor is it a judgment about your personal life. It's just an admission that sometimes there is such a thing as too stretchy. So how is it that one of the healthiest activities you can do could be bad for you? Well, let's talk about that, because in a healthy body, flexibility is one of the most vital things that you need to be able to maintain so that your joints don't get tight and rigid. But following an injury, especially something that overstretches a joint capsule, hypermobility can be one of the #1 causes of re-injury and joint degradation. That's why today we're going to talk about how the stretchiest among us can continue to go to yoga without stressing or risking further injury in the case of whiplash or injury sustained to the neck. We're going to cover ligament laxity and hypermobility in joint capsules in your neck, explaining why too much of a good thing can become problematic. If you are into yoga, we are going to show you several moves that you're going to want to avoid, alternatives you can do instead, and how you can modify other movements to give your neck stability while not compromising safety. Finally, I'm going to be demonstrating each of these movements, so we're going to see how yoga can be dangerous even if you're not hypermobile, because I'm not sure if I can still do these anymore. So, let's get started. Clinically speaking, all whiplash is an overstretch injury. It doesn't have to be something you sustained in a car accident, anything where your head might have whipped forward and backward, side to side very quickly. You might have even hit it off of something like falling down the stairs. We run the risk of overstretching a ligament. And I don't mean overstretching like you tried to touch your toes and you barely got past your knees this time and now you have a little bit of a soreness in the back of your hamstrings. An overstretch injury when it comes to something like whiplash is sustained to the ligaments and the tendons, which means soft tissue that connects bone together, but it's soft tissue that doesn't get a lot of blood supply, meaning it doesn't heal super well. We all remember gym class, and there would be that moment at some point during the year where you had done absolutely nothing to train for flexibility, but you would have to try to do the V-sit and reach, and inevitably, when you couldn't make the bare minimum requirements, one of your friends would shove your back to try to get that extra 3 inches you needed to get to your feet. If we think about this anatomically from the muscle structure, your muscles are normally contracted, and as they start to stretch, fewer and fewer fibers are connecting with one another. Once they reach their stretchy limit, that force has to go into the muscle tendon, and then if the muscle tendon can't stretch any further, it will go into the structures that hold your bones together, which are your ligaments, and ligaments, once overstretched, really don't go back to their normal length. That being said, yoga is not that aggressive. If you're going to a yoga studio and someone is jumping on your back, you need to go somewhere else. But for a lot of people, whether you are going to a yoga class for the first time or you have gone there all of your life, after injuries we get a lot of muscle tightness, and people think this would be a great time to stretch these muscles to get them to loosen up. And on the surface, that logic makes complete and total sense. How do we get a muscle to quit spasming? We stretch it. How do we loosen up any other kind of material? We stretch it. But if we have a tissue that's already injured, either is acutely injured or has been injured for years, and then we go to stretch it further, we're not adding flexibility, we're adding instability to a joint that's already compromised. For yoga, anytime we're dropping the head, flexing it back, or tilting to the left or the right, what we're doing is we're not only overstretching a joint that's already hypermobile, but we are sending a signal to your nervous system that, hey, this section of your spine isn't doing too hot. Maybe you should tighten up the muscles more to make sure it doesn't move. Because one of the only things crappier than a muscle cramp or spasm in your neck is when your vertebrae shift and sever your spinal cord. So you can imagine why your body is a little defensive when it comes to hypermobility. Now that's an insanely extreme example, but it helps to illustrate why after a yoga class you would feel good for about 30 minutes and then everything would come back with a vengeance. When you're injured, your body doesn't look at flexibility as a good thing, it looks at it as a vulnerability. So then, what the heck are we supposed to do about it, especially if we still want to keep going to our yoga classes, or we think this would be a good time to finally start incorporating yoga poses and flexibility routines into our daily life? Well, let's go find out and see how bad I hurt myself. Alright, so let's see how much stuff I break. First thing is shoulder stands. Now this one should be pretty obvious that it wouldn't be great to do with a neck injury, but it always helps to say it. Just in case it wasn't obvious, putting yourself into a suplex position while having a whiplash injury is not going to be a whole lot of fun. This is going to put about 90% of your body weight on your C6 and C7 vertebra, exacerbating any disc symptoms or overstretched ligament issues that you already have. Still pretty surprised I can get this far. The second move that's a bit of a surprise is child's pose. Now this is one of the most introductory movements you're going to do in yoga, but people find a way to hurt themselves. And what I mean by that is one of the variations of child's pose is when your face is directly on the floor and it's bearing a little bit of the weight. And what I don't want you to do is put your forehead to the floor and just rest your body weight on it, because for obvious reasons, that is going to load your neck, which is the last thing we really want to be doing when you have a fresh injury. And that would look like this. And come to think of it, I don't remember the last time I vacuumed this room, so that's a second con to doing that variation of child's pose. Finally, we would have upward dog or cobra pose. Now, it doesn't seem intrinsically like this would be a bad exercise. It's pretty straightforward, but what a lot of people like to do is when they come up into this pose, they do one of two things. One, they sink down into the exercise, which is going to put a lot of upward pressure through your scapula into your neck. The other thing that people who are already hypermobile like to do is look up and put that neck into extension, which is going to compress your facet joints and overstretch a lot of the ligaments in the front of your spine that are already pretty ticked off from the whiplash. Now, with those three don'ts out of the way, that doesn't mean that we want to skip yoga altogether. We still want to focus on mobility, but we need to put an extra emphasis on the stability portion of these movements. So, an alternative for upward dog or the cobra position is to still be on all fours, but we're going to have our elbows down. And by having the elbows down, we're taking some of the pressure out of those scapula and mid-thoracic bones. But also what I want you to do is focus on pulling your chin back and your neck straight and pulling your chest forward through those elbows. And this way, we're still getting a similar abdomen stretch and still developing core stability, but we're not forcing the neck into hyperextension, and we're also not running the risk of dropping our head down between those shoulders. Now, a second good move that's going to be pretty much in every yoga sequence is going to be that warrior two position. Not that there's anything inherently dangerous with it, but there's an alternative to the movement that you can do that's going to focus more on scapular stability and pulling those shoulder blades down, rather than trying to pull your arms apart and reach out and putting a lot of extra stress in your upper traps and your shoulders. We're going to see if I can do this in my work pants. They feel stretchy enough, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, they're kind of stretchy enough. So typically what you do is you extend your arms and you're really reaching with your fingertips to get a stretch. But what I want you to focus more on is this shoulder blade tip, pulling down like we're trying to tuck it into that back pocket, so that all stays nice and stable, supporting your thoracic spine without really loading your cervical spine. And this last move is a little anticlimactic, but it is at the end of every yoga session. And this is the Savasana or corpse pose. Now, it's not a lot of stress on your neck, but what you'll notice is if you do this unsupported, you're normally on a hard floor, even with your yoga mat. And we're going to run the risk of either putting your neck into hyperextension or flexion. and we fix that with a tiny towel. Now, in previous videos, I've talked about not using a cervical support that's hard, like the plastic ones you're buying off Amazon, but a soft towel, if you roll it correctly so that it doesn't force your chin up or force your head down, is going to be just the right amount of support while allowing you to perform this final movement. And I feel kind of weird needing to demonstrate this, but just so you know what I'm talking about, we want you to be right here in a neutral spine, not rolled so much that your chin is pointed up at the ceiling, and not rolled so little that you might that you might as well not even have a towel roll at all. Look at that, I survived. But at any rate, even when you're performing yoga perfectly, you're still going to have an anatomical response where you're getting more blood flow to these old damaged structures. Any kind of exercise is going to be a pro-inflammatory reaction. That's not a bad thing, that's how we heal. But what I am trying to say is don't be surprised if, after exercise, after performing yoga, you still have a little bit of soreness following those routines. Little soreness, good. Big soreness that is debilitating, you need to back off. Because healthy exercise is essentially controlled chaos. We're increasing blood, oxygen, and protein deliverance to an area that will need to recover, and that's great, especially for chronic or new injuries to ligaments. Like I said, they don't get great blood flow, so anything you can do to short-term increase their nutrient supply, great idea. But we don't want to overstress them. Now, there are some very basic things you can do to help with tissue recovery. Protein, whether you're getting a whey protein or a plant protein, both are full amino acid complexes to help with soft tissue healing. Additionally, to help bring down inflammation, omega-3 fatty acids and curcumin supplements are going to be ideal for helping to bring down unnecessary swelling and inflammation, because inflammation not only flares up the soft tissue involved, but it's also going to run the risk of irritating nerves. Nerves are a lot like that dog you adopted from the animal shelter. You don't know why, but loud noises just make them go crazy. They have a memory of trauma. So if you've gotten through a whiplash injury or some other kind of trauma sustained to those structures in your neck, and you start to stretch and move them, that nerve is going to be hypersensitive to anything that kind of is reminiscent of that injury, and it's going to preemptively remind you, hey, remember a decade ago whenever you fell down all those steps? I'm still here. So taking a supplement that reduces inflammation that is natural is going to be the best way for you to counteract the pain without completely shutting down your body's immune system and inflammatory response. With all that said, no, this is not your green card to quit going to yoga or trying to get in better shape. Yoga and increasing your general mobility is great for longevity, and this is not an excuse for you to skimp out on your workouts. But it is a reminder, whether this is your first time going to a yoga studio or you are a veteran of stretchiness. Mobility is nice, but what I am saying is that mobility without stability is the same as cutting off your arm. It can move all over the place now, but it's not attached, and nobody wants that alternative. What we want to be able to do is pull ourselves into an extreme range of motion and hold ourselves there. Because if you can get into a position but you can't hold that position, you done messed up. And your body's normally going to reward you by hurting you. That's why down below with the free stuff, we've got a safe movement protocol. Now this is typically for acute injuries, for people who just had a whiplash injury or who just fell down the steps. So you know what you can do safely without running the risk of re-aggravating your symptoms. It's also why in the Whiplash Recovery Blueprint we focus on isometric movements, because that ability to fire a muscle and sustain a contraction is going to be what makes up for the extra stretchiness that's now in those ligaments, the parts of your body that are supposed to keep a bone from shifting out of place. But if they're not going to heal back to their normal length, we have to do the next best thing, which is strengthen the muscles in a way that gets them able to hold a joint in place. But if being extra stretchy isn't your happy place, and you prefer to pick up heavy things and yell at the mirror like I do, that was our previous video if you want to look at that. Or if you prefer being away from everybody else, outside and running, that's going to be the focus of our next video. Because like I said previously, one of the most surprising things I found in marathon runners that come to the office is that they get neck pain from their head bobbing all the time, all however many miles a marathon is. And they don't even have a history of whiplash. So if you do have a whiplash injury and you're trying to get back into running, we're going to show you safe alternatives and things that you can change so that you can continue going. And with that, I'm Dr. Beck. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure that you like this video because there's going to be more stuff like this coming out in the weeks ahead, and I will see you in the next video.